Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens. This is Jake along with Scott, and today we are with one of the elect guests that also shares a Shure mic, right? Scott's dream has come true. We have a media member on the other side that has a microphone, and that is Will Woodington, National Brand Ambassador for Grain and Barrel Spirits. Will, thank you for joining the Bourbon Lens.
Thank you, guys. It's absolute pleasure to be here. I've been a fan of you guys for a while, so I'm glad we could finally make the connection here.
Well, we got one
Absolutely.
fan, Scott.
He's listening right now.
He's listening.
and he's on the podcast.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah. Scott, how excited are you to have someone that actually has a microphone?
Well, I'm hoping that, it makes my job editing podcasts, because apparently I've gotten really shitty at it over the past month and a half because I haven't done it. Building up a lot of content.
Yeah.
Has been nice, but kind of makes me a little rusty.
Gets you out of practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's the benefit of having somebody who's done podcasts or hosted podcasts previously. So
yeah,
it's it's a pleasure to have such a wonderful microphone device in front of me, because I've interviewed distilleries and stuff like that. We'll get into that, but there's been some times where they don't even have video on, and then it sounds like they're talking from the bottom of a well with a walkie-talkie, and
man.
it makes it a little tough.
yeah, they're in a sinking submarine. You're like,
the
hell
best
are you?
The best one is we went to see Danny Kahn 1792, and we were on, like, his office sits on top of the boiler, like it has to, and it just, all you hear in the background is and we had to put post-production, we had to do an editor's note to the listeners, hey, this was recorded in an active distillery, excuse the slow hum in the background.
Yeah, exactly. It's like ASMR for whiskey fans, though, I'm sure.
I'm sure. I mean,
That's a good point.
too bad we didn't clip that and just put it on social media, and we could have probably had a million Patreon followers because of just that alone.
Yeah.
I could go find the raw audio.
Yeah, do that.
We splice that into a repeat, and you'd never.
There's some sick people out there that like that, so we can really get them excited. But one of the things, Will, we like to tell the story behind the story. So we've caught up with Chicken Cock, and we've talked, and Greg previously. I actually wasn't on that podcast, so I'm excited. This is the first time I've actually sat down with Chicken Cock live.
It's been that long.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, that
was back when we had three of us, right?
Yeah, that was back when there was three of us, the three amigos. Now we're down to the two Padres. So Will, you weren't always in the bourbon industry from this side of the table. You were on our side. So, what was it like moving from influencer and, host of content to being someone that is being interviewed to know about a brand?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Luckily, those experiences help to arm me with knowing what the questions that are going to be posed to me when I'm in this position. What are the questions they're going to ask on the nitty gritty level about the bourbon? Are they going to ask about the history? I was able to get that perspective and say, okay, well, what would I ask someone in my position? And I got a ton of that experience. So it's been really, really cool. And we'll go into this, but just this brand overall, obviously you guys know I've drank through and sampled and reviewed hundreds of bottles out there over the years, and I wanted to work for a distillery or a whiskey supplier that had a great story, and luckily Chicken Cock is definitely one of those. So I wanted to represent a brand that I believed in, and again, Chicken Cock is a prime example of that. But it's been interesting, because the majority of my experience prior to this, was interviewing distilleries and reviewing various bottles and everything. But it's super fun, man, because I'm getting to interact with so many people that I've made connections with over the years in this space, and show off this brand to a lot of people that are still maybe new to it. And so that's been super fun.
Yeah, no, I think that's exciting to have that purview, right? Because you've tried hundreds, if not thousands, of whiskeys, and sometimes, people are so entrenched on their brand that they don't really know the pulse of what's going on in the larger scheme. So that's exciting to do that and have that. Have that background with the whiskey. So, from your side of the coin, just one more question. What's been your favorite, interview that you've conducted over the years, to help you grow and develop into what you are now?
Yeah, in terms of distillery interviews,
just whatever. What was the one interview that kind of like got you most excited about just continuing on this journey and maybe finding that brand to work with?
Yeah, I mean, oddly enough, we the Bourbon Alliance, when we were doing those virtual podcasts with distilleries and everything like that, oddly enough, we ended up talking to Greg Snyder and got samples of chicken cock and everything like that. I don't know if I could pinpoint to one specific interview, but really, I felt incredibly lucky to be able to do that. And it was primarily over the course of 2020 when so many distilleries were doing virtual interviews and podcasts when nobody could come travel to see them. And the fact that we got to talk to small brands, craft brands, big brands, distillers that have been in this game for decades, all the way up to people that just started their whiskey adventure within the last few years of that, and to just kind of, I don't know, envelop that passion and that just made me even more excited to be part of the industry in the way that I was. Obviously not working directly for it, but being immersed in it. Was just being able to gather all that experience and gather all that knowledge that people had amassed over their time building these brands and producing this whiskey and all the stories they had to tell. So I would say as a whole, it was great. I don't know if I could point to one specific one, but yeah, there were plenty of great ones that we did.
Getting to geek out over whiskey is always fun, to hear you ask the good questions, the questions that might not get talked about on tours and, during standard tastings. It's just really dive in. I think it's kind of the most interesting part.
Oh, 100%, Scott. Like, if you've been down to the Bourbon Trail, which millions and millions of people go down there every year, one thing I noticed right out of the gate when I first started going was it doesn't matter what distillery you go to, they're always going to start with a big tour group and they're going to go, now, how many of y'all know that bourbon's made of 51% corn? And it's like, I just heard this 20 times in the last couple of days. And I want to learn more about why did you choose the grains that you did? What's your aging process and what's your methods of the madness with cooking times and temperatures and all sorts of that, nitty gritty stuff that I really enjoy. So again, that, kind of soaking in that knowledge really prepped me for a position such as this, where I'm going to get asked those questions, right? And I'm going to be able to hopefully answer them in every detail that I can.
Yeah. When I got excited to host the Bourbon Lens, when Michael didn't show up for an episode. And it was like, I know Scott doesn't want to host an episode, so I just kind of stepped on in.
I'll provide color commentary, but I'm not a host of a podcast. That's for sure.
Well, you know what the thing is? Because you're a lawyer, you would think like when, like in your litigation class, you would have learned how to cross-examine people.
I talk all day long and ask people really tough questions all day long. So it's like, sometimes I just want to provide like a little lighter sense of things.
Yeah, must be nice.
To joke around a lot in my day job.
Well, that's true. I do get to joke around in sales a little bit more, but I do have to talk all damn day. And that's whether it's work or my wife or my child that doesn't stop talking.
Sometimes
you're talking to somebody.
Yeah, sometimes it works to just be quiet around the house.
Yeah, no. Sometimes it does, but with a 3-year-old, it doesn't happen. Will, you got any kids?
Speak softly. Carry a big
I
stick.
do not.
Oh, well, if you cross that threshold, you'll know about 2.5 to 4, somewhere in there. They will go through a phase where they don't know how to shut up, and and you can't tell them that because then they'll cry. So you have to be like, you just have to answer every question.
Right, exactly. You're under interrogation, and they're not going to take a vow of silence like a Buddhist monk.
No,
but why?
Soon,
but why? Why?
Oh man!
Yeah, right.
Oh man!
They're questioning the universe at all times. Yeah,
they probably make a good podcaster. Really, but why did you do that? Why?
Right, exactly.
My son, you tell him something, and he's like, "What is it?" Like that's his favorite thing. What is it? And we're just like, me and my wife look at him like, where did you get this from? And then the fact that he uses also perfectly, like he uses the term also in correct grammar. And Scott has read my writing. I do not use the term also in any stretch of the imagination appropriately. So, school, the pre-K he's in is doing something.
It's true.
Can't get it at home.
Can't get it home. I speak Kentuckian, and there's only one way that I write to Kentuckian. It's bad. Well, enough about that. Let's dive into whiskey, because that's, everyone's come here to listen to us talk about that and be nerdy about it. So before we dive into just the brand, because Chicken Cock that we're going to be primarily talking about tonight, can you tell us a little bit more about the grain and spirits, or grain and can you tell us more about the grain and barrel portfolio?
Yeah, for sure. So our founder is Madi Antilla, and he started Grain and Barrel Spirits some years ago, and we've got a wide variety of spirits that we make. I would say, some of the longer brands that we've had: Dixie Vodka, Eterno Verano Tequila, and then on the whiskey side, we've got the Elvis whiskey brand, we've got Virgil Kaine whiskey, and then of course we've got Chicken Cock whiskey. And I'm unfortunately probably leaving one brand, if not two, off. And so basically what the main goal is, with all these spirits, is to, of course, invoke quality. A lot of them have a lot of great, how should I say this, character to them. Each individual brand, I mean, if you think about Chicken Cock and just the historical nature there, and then you've got Elvis whiskey, that's, we work hand in hand with the estate of Elvis Presley on that. And Eterno Verano is really cool, and Virgil Kaine's really cool. Every single one has its own unique character and story and rhyme and reason for the spirits that are being put out. So, my primary focus, as you touched on, is the Chicken Cock whiskey line. I also do represent the Elvis and Virgil Kaine lines too.
I mean, it's got to be cool though to work with a brand like Elvis, right? Like that's iconic. Like my mom always tells the story. She's like, the one of the concerts I was supposed to go to was Elvis Presley before he passed away. She had tickets to go to him on that tour that he was on. And so she's like, I just missed my chance to see those hips. And I was like, it's a very weird thing to tell your son. So
Dad?
Yeah. I was like,
Dad, did you hear that?
Yeah. Obviously you have no hips. So the question begs, now that you've started working with the brand, what's your favorite Elvis song?
Oh man, you put me on the spot here. I mean, I've been I'm a musician and I'm kind of a music nerd. So Elvis has never been like my favorite artist, so to speak, but I do love some great Elvis songs. And I actually, the other day, I have a vinyl record player, so I've got, a little collection. Nothing. What's that?
I saw.
Yeah. So, you saw my post.
I saw your post.
Elvis. Yeah. About Midnight Snack.
Yeah.
I got a live at the Madison Square Garden, man. And like that Elvis right there, like the one who's going super fast and he's sweating his ass off on stage and he's wearing the bedazzled white, uniform, and like, that's my kind of Elvis. He's just like fast paced and he goes into a really slow ballad and he kicks things back up. Like the energy on that record is so awesome. But I would have to say the song Guitar Man by Elvis is my favorite.
Yeah. Scott, do you have a favorite Elvis song? I know you like to listen to Huey Lewis in the News.
Huey Lewis in the News. I don't know.
I mean, man.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit outside I'm not a huge music guy, but yeah, I mean the occasional Elvis song. I know that I've tasted the Elvis whiskeys and they were a lot of fun, and it was just interesting to like have a whiskey and I put on some Elvis on Spotify. So
yeah,
and I know that I shared that bottle with a lot of people that were like Elvis fans, like, and they were like, "This is just interesting to drink a whiskey that's based around Elvis." And
yeah. So, it's cool, man, because we've got a target audience with that brand of millions and millions across the world, because Elvis is beloved everywhere. And that's the really cool thing is we're just trying to embody, his persona and what he brought to pop culture and everything throughout the time that he was alive, and he continues to do. So it's a really fun brand.
Yeah. Ain't nothing but a hound dog. Come on. Just keep it simple. Go with one of the greatest. Yeah. Greatest hits.
Yep.
Oh man.
So, but I do have to ask, how is Midnight Snack?
It is fantastic, and for anyone that needs a reference point on that, it's our third whiskey that we've launched on the Elvis line of things. It's a flavored whiskey. It's 70 proof, and Elvis's favorite sandwich, one of his favorite snacks, was a peanut butter banana bacon sandwich. It's been called a few different things, but yeah, that was his favorite snack, his favorite midnight snack. And so we basically turned that into whiskey form. And it is, I don't drink flavored whiskey really ever, pretty much. But when I tried this, I was blown away. And you may look at the label, you may look at the description and go, how are those flavors going to really work? And they work beautifully. It is just delicious from start to finish.
Yeah. So I got to admit, when I saw it come out, I would have thought, like, okay, we're coming up on April 1st. Like, maybe it's just not a real label and somebody's just putting out a little joke. But it came out like back in February, March.
Yeah.
I was like, shit, maybe it is a real thing.
Yeah, dude, it's been popular. But I live here in Michigan, and it has just been selling like crazy up here. And again, we're hitting on both cylinders because we're appealing with Elvis fans who are going to see that bottle on the shelf and go, even if I don't even care what it tastes like, maybe I just want to put that up on my shelf with my Elvis collection of things. And hopefully they'll open it and try it. But the other part is, of course, the flavored whiskey market is so huge, and that's a proprietary flavor that nobody else has. So, we're appealing to a lot of people with that bottle, I think, and I hope you guys get to try it soon because it is really awesome.
Yeah, I just think it's very interesting. Like the portfolio, Grain and Barrel Spirits is, you guys are not afraid to venture into different things, and I know we're going to talk predominantly about Kentucky whiskeys, and nothing wrong with that. That's what we enjoy. But it is cool to see a brand that just is like, we're just going to try what we know and what we love. So,
yeah, 100%. It gives me variety to talk about a lot of different stuff, and again, all these whiskeys, all the spirits in general, but specifically what I get to talk about with the whiskeys, they're all so different from each other. They all have different influences and directions and flavors and production stories. So now that we're here, we've ventured around the grain and barrel spirits stratosphere. Let's take the gravity pool into the chicken cock sphere now. I don't know why I went like astronomy, like 101 there, but
take a gravity pull into the chicken cock.
Yep. Where is Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Yeah.
Is he back there handing you notes?
I've had one too many whiskeys tonight. That's exactly what just happened with that one. So now that we're here, and we've landed in Bardstown, Kentucky, because that's where predominantly made. Can you just give us a quick history refresher on the or the historical significance of chicken cock?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite things to talk about with the brand. And I feel very lucky for that reason because many other brands out there don't have nearly 170-year-old story to tell. So being a big history buff, it's been one of the biggest pleasures getting to dive into that side of things. And yeah, so the original distillery was started by a guy named James A. Miller down in Paris, Kentucky in 1856. So that predates the Civil War. That predates Jack Daniels by about 20 years, predates quite a bit of stuff. And so the distillery was set up pretty much right in the heart of that city in Paris, Kentucky. And so it was a very focal point of the community and of Bourbon County at that point. Paris, Kentucky is the seat of Bourbon County. And both Bourbon County and Paris, Kentucky were named in honor of the French who helped us win the Revolution. And so it's a very, very historical space that we were in for so long. So James A. Miller, he was a farmer, built this distillery for about $75,000 in 1856. So quite a bit of money. And he only lived to see it into fruition for about 40 years. He died in 1860. Don't really know how, but he was like 42 when he died, and he had been selling whiskey already before he built the distillery too. So he had already been making a name for himself. After he died, they kept his name kind of tied to the brand too. If you look at old chicken cock advertisements, they always mention J.A. Miller or James A. Miller on advertisements because people knew that he was part of the quality story there. And so the distillery goes up for auction. William Tarr ends up buying it. You probably heard that name. He buys it, and he goes after about 4 years or so. He goes in as half investor with a guy named George G. White. George White was a former clerk for James A. Miller before he passed at the distillery. So those two were running the distillery together throughout the 1860s, 1870s, and they were producing some really well-aged bourbon, and they were shipping barrels all over the country. and they were really successful. They were building mansions for themselves in Paris, Kentucky. These guys were raking in money from it. And I've got original bills of sale from 1873 from as far as Montana. So we were getting pretty far across the country, not just locally. So anyway, fast forward into the late 1800s, and again, the brand it just continues to build a reputation for supreme quality in America of the bourbon spirit. And one of the early trademark infringement cases in the United States was actually with chicken cock whiskey. They noticed that there was a guy, I forget what his first name is, but he had the last name Miller, just like the original founder, James A. Miller. And he was producing a really young, crappy whiskey out of Boston. And he was using a rooster, just like they were on their advertisements. And so they took them to court and actually won the battle. And from that point on, nobody else could put a rooster on their bottle. So it just goes to show you that how well it was known, what it was known for, and the historical significance behind it, even up to that point. Turn of the century, about 1900, the distillery goes up for sale again, and this time a bigger conglomerate at that time purchased the rights, and they stopped producing whiskey at the distillery in Paris, Kentucky, around 1910 to 1915. At that point, it was being made at another distillery in Louisville. Because there was a temperance movement going on leading up to about 1920, just before Prohibition hit. Whiskey sales were going down. They weren't producing a lot of chicken cock at that point. And so it kind of just went into the shadows for a little bit until the late 1920s. They started making it as a medicinal whiskey. I actually have one of those original bottles here in my home. And at that same time, too, there was a guy named Sam Bronfman who owned Seagram's and a few other Canadian distilleries up in Canada. He got the rights to start producing chicken cock whiskey, and he was making it as a pure Canadian rye during Prohibition. It was legal for Canada to produce whiskey so long as they were exporting it. So that was their workaround for it. So he was producing this as a rye, and to get around to try and aid in the smuggling back to the other side, it came in a pint size, and it was being shipped in a tin can. So if you've seen any of our modern tin can releases, they're paying homage to that. Being shipped in a tin can and coming across the border and getting into places like the Cotton Club in Harlem, New York, where Duke Ellington, that was his favorite house pour whiskey at the Cotton Club in Harlem, was chicken cock rye. So fast forward after that, Prohibition took a big toll on the whiskey industry, and then you got the war, right? And they were just making industrial alcohol at that point. They weren't really producing well-aged bourbon. That really took a hit. And so chicken cock, unfortunately, around 1950, that original distillery burned down in Paris, Kentucky. And at that point, sort of sequentially, they said, we're not even going to focus on reviving this brand again. We're just kind of done. So it went into the shadows until about 2011. Our founder at Grain and Barrel Spirits, Marty, he was at the Oscar Gates Museum, which I'm sure you guys are very familiar with. And he was walking around. He wanted to add a whiskey brand to the portfolio here, and he saw this bottle with the name Chicken Cock on the front. And he's like, what the hell is that? That's really interesting. I'm going to do some research on that. And he did, and came to find out how historical it was and how well known it was for its supreme quality in the market for so long, and decided, you know what, this is well worth reviving and rising from the ashes. So yeah. And it was around 2017 or 18 where we started producing whiskey in the format that we are now, Kentucky straight bourbon and rye.
So it's a long storied history, but now we're to modern times, and obviously Paris is not the whiskey capital of the world anymore or anything like that. And for people who don't know, like if you kind of meander northeast of Bardstown, you're going to run into Lexington, and from Lexington you'll continue north and a little bit east. You'll get to Paris. It's kind of like slightly
out in the middle of
nowhere.
Horse farms.
Yeah, you're gonna take 64.
It's gorgeous out there.
Yeah, you'll take 64, and you'll get off at an exit literally that is Paris Lexington, and you either go right or you go left. That's just about it. And so obviously, your team needed to find a place to produce this liquid that is gonna carry that same reputation that they found found out about? Like, so how did that happen and that partnership kind of come to fruition to start to produce the whiskey that's in the glass tonight?
Yeah, great question. So, one of the first pieces to that puzzle was, okay, if we want to revive chicken cock to the supreme quality bourbon and rye that it was known for so long, we really got to get a great master distiller in here. So, we hired on Greg Snyder as our master distiller. And for anyone that doesn't know who Greg is, he's a roughly a 45-year industry vet in the whiskey industry. Started at Seagram's when he was about 17. He used to be the managing director of Austin Nichols Wild Turkey. He also used to be the master cooper for Olive Brown Foreman. So he has an amazing resume filled with management, distillation, maturation, all sorts of great things. And when Greg came on, he had great relationships with the folks over at Bardstown Bourbon Company. Him and Steve Nally are very close friends, and Greg knows everybody in the industry. So as you guys are well aware, Bardstown Bourbon Company has an amazing complex. They've got tons of great modern equipment. Tons of aging warehouse space, even more and more every day, it seems like. And it's a 24-hour sort of operation going on over there. So Greg, helped to strike a deal with them to be part of their collaborative distillation program. So, in terms of how that's done, right? Obviously, Bardstown Bourbon Company has an amazing reputation and great quality for the whiskey that they produce. Greg will oversee, right, when he goes to distill our next batch of bourbon or rye. He'll oversee that process and make sure they're doing, operating with the correct cooking times and temperatures, enzymes, grains, all that stuff. So it's not just a set it and forget it type of partnership by any means. But we're so proud to have them, helping us produce this great historic brand in modern day.
No, I think that's really cool, and that kind of leads us into trying the first whiskey of the evening, and what is, I would assume, your flagship product, right? Like the Chicken Cock 90 proof Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey. Would that be a good thought to say that's your all's flagship product for the brand?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Whether it be our Kentucky Straight Bourbon or our rye, we would consider those sort of our flagship. Our double oak, we would also, our new double oak, we would kind of ease into that as well. But the Kentucky Straight Bourbon floats around the $60 mark, and the rye around the $70 mark. So yeah, those are more of our flagship, what we're known for, what's going to be on back bars and made for cocktails and stuff too. So, but yeah, the Kentucky Straight Bourbon, man. If you look at that bottle, by the way, I want to insert a little piece of history here too. Like I said, Chicken Cock, when it was being made as a Canadian rye whiskey during Prohibition and put in those pint-sized bottles, it looked exactly like the bottle you have in front of you, the Kentucky Straight Bourbon, but in pint-sized form. So we were able to find that, and we blew it up to a 750 milliliter. And it's got chicken wire on the outside. It's a beautiful bottle design that only we have, and it's super identifiable, and it's really beautiful. So 90 proof Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey. It's going to be a blend of roughly 40-year-old distillate that we produced in collaboration with Bardstown Bourbon Company. That's got 70% corn, 21% rye, and 9% malted barley in that mash bill. And then there are also a couple of older bourbons that we've mingled in there as well. So what I love about our bourbon is I'm sure, just like you guys, I've tried hundreds, if not thousands, of different whiskeys. And, I don't know if it's just by nature, but you kind of gravitate, or you graduate in proof as you drink more and more. You're able to tolerate higher and higher proof. So usually I would go to bourbons that are 100 proof, if not more, if it was just a regular day. Being that this is 90 proof, though, it doesn't drink light. It's got a ton of great character to it. It's got a good balance of sweetness and some great spice on the back end. And it's really full bodied for being 90 proof. So I actually love sipping this neat, man. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, this is super traditional Kentucky bourbon. I mean,
yep.
That's what I like about it. And it's, as you said, it's easy to drink. You'd be surprised that it's 90 proof.
Yeah.
Not that it drinks hot, but the consistency of it is what would surprise you. Be like, well, it's 90 proof. Most people, all the cast strength drinkers out there are like, oh God.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
You immediately associate it with, there's a little bit more water in that before I get it in my glass, but there's really not. It's super, viscous and flavorful, and it really carries a lot of flavors to it.
Yeah. So I started a new thing the other day when we were interviewing someone else, and I just have been writing my tasting notes down as we go. And it's really weird. Like, and Scott's gonna be like, it's not that weird because you talk about food every podcast. But this gives me very big like sweet breakfast vibes. So sweet nose, powdered sugar, and then like French toast. Like that's kind of the notes that I'm getting on the nose. And then it's balanced by that sweet palate, cinnamon sugar kind of shine through. And then it's herbaceous on the back end. Like it drinks almost like a flavored tea. Scott, you're more the tea connoisseur of the two of us. But like, don't you get like an herbaceous?
That's my second tasting note.
Yeah.
Oh,
sweet
wow.
tea.
Yeah.
Nailed
Sweet
it.
tea. Yeah. I mean, it's sweet tea. It's like, if I was going to drink bourbon in the summer, which I do, I have a bourbon podcast, it's called Bourbon Lens. But if I was going to drink bourbon in the summer, this is probably where I would gravitate towards, because I could literally put this on ice and it tastes like sweet tea and bourbon.
Yeah, that's a great point, man.
It's not overly spicy. It's not overly sweet. It's just like super balanced, like honey, sweet tea, corn, and toasted wood and toasted nuts are my tasting notes. So honey and sweet tea, I mean, that's perfect, right? Glass of sweet tea with a little bit of honey.
Yeah. And that's how many episodes we've done together, right, Will? Like that I can guess about what he's going to put down on his tasting notes, because we taste very similar things. We may derive it in different words, but like the back end finish, it's not a hug by any means. It's a palate finish. It's a dry palate. But it does linger with you in those herbaceous notes. Like, hey, I want to have another sip. And, I was like, I need to drink more because I'm not getting it. And then I'm like, maybe I am getting it. And like, it's just like, I'm trying to overthink this. Like sometimes you've written reviews. Like sometimes you're searching for something and you're like, it's right here in front of you, you dumb piece of crap. Like that's what this was. I was searching for something and I ended up drinking the whole 2-ounce sample that Scott gave me.
I think I gave you more of the rye because I figured that you might like the rye better, but
you gave
the
me
way you're talking about the bourbon,
you gave me a ton of the rye. You gave me a 4-ounce sample of the rye.
I got plenty here. I just only could give you a couple samples, but
yeah.
But honestly, on the nose on this one, it's totally different than the palate for me.
Yeah.
On the nose, I was expecting like berries, like red raspberries, like super berry fruit forward. But then I get to the palate and it's herbally, and I say sweet tea. It's almost like a black and a green tea, like mixed. If you were to make like sweet green tea, I guess. Maybe I'm overthinking this.
Yeah, you're overthinking it.
My tasting notes are honey and sweet tea. Like, yeah,
just keep it.
I don't think you can go wrong there.
All right, Scott, you get the picture, and then we both put our notes down, and look, we have our review for the week of the podcast. Yeah, it's done.
Lovely. No, those are great notes. I have to agree with you, and that's what I really love about the Kentucky Straight Bourbon, man, is that it's just none of the flavors are too aggressive, none of the flavors are too spicy or sweet or too dry. It's just super well balanced, and to your point, man, it is just a quintessential Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey, and it is flavorful from start to finish. And again, I am completely more than content sipping this even at the 90 proof that it's at.
Yeah.
So, thinking about that, like you can't just have a standard offering, you have to innovate. Right. And so, what are you all doing from an innovation perspective? We'll get to the rye. We'll swing back around to the rye in a little bit. From an innovation perspective, how do you do that in this category and stay not be price prohibitive, right? Like when you add secondary barrel influences or anything like that, it gets more expensive really quickly. Like how are you all staying in a sweet spot to attract customers?
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge for any producer out there, unless you're the size of these really large scale guys. Being able to produce really fantastic whiskey, make it well aged, being able to put an age statement on anything, do a secondary cask finish, like you said, and keep it, make sure you're not cost prohibitive. It is a challenge, right? But there are always ways. Double Oak is one of the newest releases that I think really hits all the marks there. And we're chicken cock, I think, is as far in the last few years that we've been producing bourbon rye has never stayed in necessarily one little box. We've done things like offer, of course, a flagship bourbon and rye, but then we've done, really limited a 20-year-old Canadian rye, which of course that's very expensive, but it helps to set us apart and tell a story. And that's one of the biggest things too, is like being able to tell our story and connect it into the rhyme and reason for doing what we're doing, the reasons why we take all the steps with our barrel production and partner with such a great distillery like Bardstown Bourbon Company is because, is somebody gonna be able to walk into the store and decide between this and Jim Beam White Label or some screw top bourbon or something like that? No, probably not. But what we're really aiming to do is, when you're standing at the store and you're looking at all these different brands that might be on the shelf, Chicken Cock is going to speak to you, whether it's from its known quality or whatever. So, it can be a challenge, but like I said, the double oak in particular is one release where we were able to source some whiskey and we put our own touch on it by double barreling it, and by doing that, it has created this amazing flavor in that whiskey, and we're able to put an age statement on there, and we're able to come at it with a pretty attractive price point in today's market. So doing that kind of stuff more and more is going to help us to attract a wider consumer base and tap into the modern whiskey drinker, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people just have to understand. And I don't think we address this enough on the podcast. When you're doing partner distillation, it's not cheap at any scale. And the scale is very variable, right? Based upon your relationship and things like that. But let's just call a spade a spade. A new barrel of new make is right around $1,000. Like, it's not a cheap game. And then you have an elevated packaging. And if you have purchased any liquid to add to your stocks along the way, like that also has to be wrapped in and taxed. And thank you for the Kentucky legislature, what they just did to remove aging barrel tax. That will help the price of the spirit from Kentucky barrel taxes over the next 7 years, as that kind of dissipates. But that's a long way away from like just disappearing. It's still going to be there. It's still going to be additive. And I think that's what people don't understand about brands who are collaboratively distilling or NPDing or non-produced distillers is that their new make distillate is not cheap. Taxes are not cheap. Bottling is not cheap. And I think people just think that you're getting the Heaven Hill price. Well, Heaven Hill can probably produce a barrel for $500 a barrel. Like, it's just different.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. There's so much overhead into producing something like this. But for smaller companies like we are, to your point, we've got completely distinct glass. That's a lot of money to do that, but we love it because it helps to, again, call back to our history. We did that for a reason. We could take the easier way out and change up our barrel production process. We could just be sourcing whiskey and calling it our own without having any touch point in the distillation process or being able to call out any of the specifications that we want, right? So we could take all these steps inherently, and maybe we can come out a little bit cheaper on the shelf, but overall, it's not going to be the same quality aspect that we want it to be. And again, we didn't go into this with the intention of simply just sourcing whiskey and calling it our own. We're going to distill whiskey, albeit collaboratively. We're going to distill whiskey under that Chicken Cock label to bring it back to the market. So all those things, and then again, special secondary finishes, which we've done rum barrel finishes and cognac finishes and all sorts of different things. Those are expensive too, right? You gotta get with a broker. You gotta get the barrels. You gotta dump your whiskey in. You're going to get taxed more. You're going to get all these things. And I mean, I came at it from the consumer point of view a long time ago, and it's easy to sit there and look at a shelf and go, oh man, that's a little bit more expensive than, why is that brand expensive? Just simply because they don't know it. They don't know what went into it or all the overhead costs or any of those factors sometimes. And so it's just getting out there and being able to talk to people about all the extra steps that we take that just simply invoke quality into the whiskey. They're not unnecessary steps that we're taking, right? There's a rhyme and a reason to why we do it all. So
I've got to ask, I guess, going back to the double oak, right? It's a Kentucky whiskey. What makes it a
is.
Kentucky whiskey as opposed to, I mean, it tastes like bourbon to me.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming there was something at before it went into the secondary barrel.
Yeah.
Made it a Kentucky whiskey.
Yep. It's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. So the story on our brand new Double Oak Kentucky Straight Whiskey, back in 2014, there was a logging shortage of new American white oak. The ground was oversaturated where loggers would normally pull out the lion's share of new American white oak. And so they couldn't get machinery in there to pull all these logs out. So bourbon was in really high supply. What new American white oak was in really high supply and I'm getting that the other way around. Really high demand, really short supply. Sorry. So you had bourbon producers like this, because we did source this whiskey. Bourbon producers like this that were forced, they had no new barrels to put their bourbon in. So they were forced to dump it into a used barrel. And at that point, you can't call it a bourbon. So that's why this is labeled as a Kentucky Straight Whiskey. After aging in a used cask for roughly 7 years, at that point, right, maximum flavor extraction had already occurred in that barrel. And we wanted to invoke a lot more flavor, a better finish, a better texture, what have you on it. So we dumped it into brand new white oak American barrels and rested all the barrels in the very top part of the rickhouse as our Bardstown Bourbon Company. And our goal there, of course, was sweltering heat up at the top part of the rickhouse. We're going to be able to pull quite a bit of flavor out of that second maturation process. And but yeah, that's why it's called Double Oak, and that's why it's called a Kentucky whiskey versus a bourbon.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's got all the mash bill right to be a bourbon. It's 80% corn, 11.5% rye, and 8.5% malted barley on that.
So then it could have been a corn whiskey.
Yeah. Yeah. It could have been a corn whiskey.
Because the 80% threshold.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes me like it even a little bit more.
So, getting into this whiskey as before Scott has like a euphoric moment about it being corn whiskey.
Hey, stop.
On the nose, this one like really gives me some like Tennessee vibes, like banana, vanilla custard, like just real sweet, and like an elevated, like it feels like that charcoal mellowing type of thing, like that second barrel influence is like really shining to give it a depth of vanilla. And then I think I don't know what makes banana smell, but like I got a little bit of banana on the nose. I don't know about Will or Scott on that one if I'm crazy, but I do get a little bit of that banana yeast note in there.
I get like almost like a melted vanilla ice cream. Like it's very like, I think you said, what did you say? Custard?
Yeah.
Like desserty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The one that I say the most, creme brulee, right?
Yeah.
It's like that almost vanilla pudding, caramelized sugar.
Oh, okay.
Kind of deal.
Now,
I've not been to too many fancy restaurants lately. I did go to a nice steakhouse in DC a few weeks ago, but
I have creme brulee every evening before bed.
With your pinky out, right?
It's stuck in this position actually.
Yeah.
He's got his blowtorch and just browns his sugar.
Spring water or sparkling water?
Give me just tap, please.
Tap, please. Don't just give me damn water on the table. I just want something to drink.
If I have to pay for it, I want the tap. I want the free stuff. But the palate, I get more of that caramelized brown sugar, vanilla, oak, like traditional barrel forward double oak, but like balanced with that sweetness of a creme brulee type of thing. It's like, as I smell my glass, which is one of my favorite things that I don't think a lot of people do, us whiskey nerds do, smell your glass after it's empty.
Oh yeah. It's a great trick.
On the back end, there's a lot of mocha.
Yeah. That is, and that could be from that second maturation process, or those darker cocoa or chocolate sort of notes. I've definitely gotten a lot of people, including myself, right on the finish as you were saying it, like that comes through, and it's awesome because you're getting like all sorts of these great desserty flavors that I absolutely love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like cocoa nibs. Like it's kind of like a bitter chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's my one trick about tasting whiskey is drink the whiskey and then smell the glass afterwards.
Yeah, like go back to it.
Yeah.
And figure out what the hell you missed, because you miss a lot when you just let that little bit of liquid evaporate.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we talk about the packaging with the chicken cock, the standard offerings, the straight rye and the straight bourbon, but your limited time offerings or your special releases, they come in a little bit different packaging, but still recognizable. But is the cap, is it a shot glass? Is this a throwback to like Prohibition times, or how'd that come into play?
Yeah. So great question. And both of our bottle designs, whether it's the one with the chicken wire on it or the one with the starburst, sort of the apothecary style bottle is what we call that one that Double O comes in. It's beautiful. But both are callbacks to what chicken cock used to look like, including that one. And back during that time, this is when chicken cock was being made as medicinal whiskey, and it was being packaged in this beautiful sunburst sort of bottle. If you look back, that same company, I don't know if it was National Distillers or if it was the American Medicinal Spirits Company, they had a couple of other brands that they actually put in this same exact style packaging back then. We're the only ones that have it in modern day. But I've gotten that question a lot about what is with the cap on top, and is that supposed to be a shot glass? And there's another brand that might come to mind that also has that. But this is a callback to how it used to look. And I'm making an assumption here, but it's a pretty good assumption. If this is how it looked when it was being made as a medicinal whiskey, you were prescribed that medicinal whiskey by a doctor who told you you're prescribed X amount of ounces per day or per week. Well, how do you measure your ounces back then? Boom, you put a cap right on top and you can measure out exactly how much you need from that bottle. So that's my thought, but that's how it used to look. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they still do it with children's Tylenol.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, it's a plastic cheap cap, but
or mouthwash or anything else. Like you can just measure it easily like that. And that's my thought process on why they had a cap on the original bottle back then was to measure out medicinal whiskey.
No, I mean, it's perfect. It is like a throwback to,
yeah.
It's an experience to open the bottle, right? And that sounds kind of silly, but as whiskey drinkers, yes, you can unscrew the top or you can pop the cork. You get the loud cork pop, but this is just a little bit different. It's just like screw the top, then pop the cork. It's kind of an experience to open the bottle, which I appreciate.
No, I love it, and it kind of invokes, we use the same exact packaging for a few of our other more limited releases. So we did Island Rooster, which is a rum barrel finished rye, came in that packaging. We've done a couple of beer barrel finishes in the past. And I think our 15-year or limited 15-year that we did came in that, as well as a limited 8-year. So really outside of the tin can releases, any of the special editions or sort of limited time offerings that we've done have come in that sunburst bottle in front of you.
So will this be a limited time offering, or are you going to try to bring it out a little bit more?
So, that's the tough thing is that we've got good supply on it. So we'll be able to, have this in the market for a little bit of time. Once it's gone kind of deal. And we can't replicate this, the specific mash bill with being put in a used bourbon barrel. And then the second mash, right. It's too many variables for us to be able to recreate this product. But we are considering Double Oak as part of sort of, for the time being, our flagship portfolio. So we should have, if that tells you anything about, we should have it around for a decent amount of time, but we will eventually run out of stock on it.
Yeah, because I talked to a few people, even just tonight, that have tasted this, and they were all pretty high on it. So
yeah,
I think if you're listening and you see a bottle and it's within your means, it's probably going to be worth picking up, just because I think an 8-year age-stated whiskey period plus double oaking, I think it's $100. It's a limited time offering. You might not get it next year, so maybe grab a bottle.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely has become popular. It just started hitting shelves maybe in the last 3-4 weeks at most, and it has been gaining a lot of attention. We're selling a lot of bottles of this stuff. It's going super well, which we're proud of. But to your point, I think we hit so many of the marks. For me personally, the packaging to start with is absolutely beautiful and stand out. We've got an 8-year age statement on this whiskey. The flavor is phenomenal. It's 92 proof, but it's got so much texture and everything to it that again, this is one of those whiskeys that I just absolutely love sipping neat because there's other double oak sort of whiskeys out there, and I've enjoyed those and I've drank those in the past, but those go through 2 different maturation cycles with brand new barrels, so they're very rich and very oaky. And I can only do one of those pours, and I'm usually done. And with this, I can just come back to double oak time and time and time again.
Mm. And I think one of the things that we should really express is that we are big double oak fans on the Bourbon Lens. Scott's single barrel pick of a Woodford double oaked won our like bourbon bracket way back when. And we've just been a fan of them ever since. And so, it's always fun to see the different expressions of double oak and how they shine and show up, from different producers along the way. 'Cause they're all slightly different and slightly unique. So, I truly appreciate, this offering for what it is and how different it is compared to, some of the, most traditional double oaks that are in the market.
Yeah, for sure. And to Scott's point, like or to your point too, Jake, the sort of chocolatey notes, the darker notes that come through on the back end, for sure, were probably influenced by that second maturation process. But all in all, this just drinks like a great, Kentucky. It drinks like a bourbon, right? To me, even though it is a Kentucky whiskey, which I really love because it's got all those great desserty, sugary sort of flavors and just a gentle rolling spice finish. And again, I just love the flavor that we pulled out on this one. So we're really proud of it.
Yeah. So to round out the conversation on the core lineup, we have to get to the Chicken Cock Kentucky Straight Rye. And this is the most interesting one of the 3 to me from a holistic perspective. So, as you mentioned, as part of the story, they went to Canadian rye whiskey for a time. And that's what they were just, producing and then selling out. Like, what made you all land on a Kentucky style rye whiskey for your all's release versus an homage to a Canadian style or maybe an Indiana or an Empire type of rye?
Good question. We did pay homage to those Canadian rye roots that we very briefly had at the end of Prohibition with our Cotton Club 20-year Canadian rye release. But with Greg coming on as master distiller, his desire was to distill whiskey and maturate it and bring Chicken Cock home back to its original state of Kentucky. We didn't want to veer really out of those lanes for anything that we were distilling or producing. So, I will tell you, the mash bill on this rye is a 95.5 rye. So it's 95% rye, 5% malted barley. You have seen a lot of those coming out of Indiana, and so there is that little twang there. But all this is collaboratively distilled at Bardstown Bourbon Company, and Greg specifically picked this mash bill because of the acclaim and the great flavor that a 95% rye can bring to the table. And I have to agree, I absolutely love our rye. It's 90 proof, just like the Kentucky Straight Bourbon. But yeah, we wanted to do everything in Kentucky because that's where Chicken Cock originated at.
So, when you think about this offering, does this carry the same, $60 or this is $70? And what's the age roughly? Like, what does this kind of normally end up at?
Yeah, so it's a few bucks more than the bourbon. On the bottle, you see it says age at least 2 years. I would tell you that, without that, this rye tastes way older than it is. And, rye whiskey maturates at a much faster pace than bourbon does flavor wise. And the amount of flavor that we're able to pull out, due to our barrel selection specs and where we age these barrels at, strategically in the warehouses at Bardstown Bourbon Company, we're able to pull out a lot more flavor in a sooner amount of time. So I don't know if you agree, and I don't know what you think about the rye, but in my opinion, it drinks much older than it is.
Yeah, this one, it pops with flavor. Like, it's like you sip it and it almost like, it was kind of weird when I was sipping this one. I was thinking more like an IPA, like how an IPA just kind of like, it just makes your tongue like kind of like pop, it like goes everywhere. So like the rye spice was what was doing that for me. But not like bitter and drying like IPAs do, but it was like that fruit, that lemon, those bright notes kind of just pop. To know that this is only 2 years, I didn't even really recognize that whenever I was tasting it. I think I tasted it like about a week and a half ago. But sipping on it now, it's like, this is really only a little over 2 years old. It's kind of surprising because you get a lot of different flavor from it.
Yeah.
It's really funny. What's really funny is we mentioned at the beginning of this, we were tasting the Bardstown collection earlier today. And if this doesn't oddly remind me of the Heaven Hill wheat whiskey for some odd reason, I don't know what it is. It's like a juicy, hazy IPA with like tangerine, peach.
A lot of people said that after you left too. They said, this reminds me of like tropical fruit, like boom, like it just pops out of the glass.
And this gives me those same type of like iterative flavors, but like you mentioned, it's not bitter. Like an IPA like leaves you with a bitter taste. This has a like that juiciness kind of like hits you in the back of the jaw, and like you kind of salivate versus like your palate clearing out.
Yeah.
At first, like when this first poured out, I didn't really care for it, to be honest. Like I give my son like allergy medicine at night just because of the season. And like it smelled a little bit like his almost Robitussin-y to me. But then once it's been sitting here for 10, 15 minutes, which another trick, if you're going to drink whiskey, don't just pour it in a glass and shoot it. Like let it sit there for a minute or two, like get some flavors. This really opens up really nicely. And it also clementine, like I've been eating a lot of those halos, oranges things. They've been delightful lately from Kroger, getting a little bit of that in there. And I've eaten probably 12 to 15 pounds of halos in the last like 3 weeks.
Be careful with all that stomach acid.
Dude, I've already had a kidney stone. I'm just waiting for the second one.
You're showing your age.
Dude, you turn 30 and shit goes downhill in a hurry.
I didn't get a kidney stone for my birthday, but
good for you. Lucky.
Maybe next year.
But at 34, I signed up for a vasectomy.
Gone off the rails again.
Hey, I'm just telling you, when you reach your limit of children, you put an end to it.
Yeah. Well, I love all your flavor notes, guys, because they sync up quite well with mine. One of the first things that I tasted when I first tasted chicken cock rye was that pop of like peach sort of flavor. And I did not expect that. I'm like 95.5 rye. It's going to be, probably spicy on the palate. I do get a sweet mint sort of note on this that I typically, for whatever reason, get a lot of times on 95.5s, which I love. But all in all, what I love about a rye whiskey is that, apologies if you can hear the train going by right now. I live like a house from it. But what I love about our rye whiskey is that it's not too aggressive on the palate, and it's got a lot of these sort of really interesting sort of sweeter notes. Some honey, some peach, some of that sweet mint, and then of course it's got that spice there because it's a rye whiskey. But I find that it's so much more palatable to so many more people. I've done a lot of in-store tastings and events and stuff, and I've tasted a lot of people who historically never drink rye or shy away from it because it's got too aggressive a flavor, and they end up absolutely loving our rye and get a bottle or like to make a cocktail with it, whatever it may be. But I just love the balance of flavor again, and the diversity that it brings forward with its flavor too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this goes well in a big cup of crushed ice and a little bit of simple syrup, and off you go, and you're ready to party. Yeah,
because you got those sweet fruit notes. You got you got the mint in there, right? So you're kind of halfway there. I think that would work great.
Yeah.
So I must have zoned out, but you said this was 95.5 rye. That's kind of surprising. I mean, it's just surprising to me.
It surprised me too when I learned what our mash bill was on this. Because again, if you tasted this blind, you wouldn't guess that it's a 95.5 rye, and you would guess that it's older than it is too.
Mm-hmm. Scott hates 95.5 rye most of the time.
I gotcha, Scott.
Yeah, no. Well, I will tell you, there have been some very, very good 95.5 ryes coming out of Bardstown.
They're just different. They're built different.
Well, they are different, and I've had some 5-year, some 6-year. Like, if you guys continue to sit on these barrels for a little while, like, holy moly, like this whiskey is going to be like, hang on to a few of these barrels because
Yeah, 100%. I have the same mentality. I haven't had the pleasure of going down to Bardstown with Greg yet to taste these whiskeys straight out of the barrel, but that's something I'm really looking forward to as well, because I would like to get an indication of how the proof changes the flavor profile and sort of what this whiskey can become with some more age behind it, because it's just going to continue to get better and better. And the flavors that are already there at this point are really outstanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, this has been a lot of fun. I missed the first Chicken Cock podcast. So to go through this and enjoy these whiskeys and get to experience, 3, distinctly different pours because they build on each other and then uniquely different with the rye has been great. And just learning a little bit about the brand myself has been, super exciting. I hope, hope Scott, you learned something. I know I learned something today.
No, it's been a lot of fun. And I had to go look it up while we were, maybe while I was zoning out about the mash bill, but episode 99 was when we had Greg Snyder on. So I don't know what number this podcast for, maybe like 225, 230, somewhere in that range. It's been 125 episodes, so 2 years. So
everybody was due for a refresher.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was high time for a refresher, and no, it's definitely been eye-opening and a lot of fun. And this double oaked is just, sorry, Jake, you're not getting much of that. I'm just kidding.
All good. I'm enjoying the rye now that it's opened up quite a bit. So Will, hey, we appreciate you joining this episode of the Bourbon Lens. Can you tell people where they can find out more about grain and barrel spirits and Chicken Cock in particular?
Yeah, 100%. So, please follow us on social media. We're always, popping up with different events and what we're doing and new releases and cocktail recipes and stuff. So, obviously at Chicken Cock Whiskey. But you can check out more about Chicken Cock Whiskey specifically at chickencockwhiskey.com. If you want to find out more about grain and barrel spirits as a whole, that's grainandbarrelspirits.com. And then if you want to check out my social media page and follow along with me and what I do, I'm on Instagram under Mash Bill Will. So please feel free to follow me. And guys, this has been such a pleasure to finally sit down with you two after being a fan for so long and an admirer and a fellow whiskey nerd. And hopefully it's not too long before we can catch up again.
Yeah, absolutely. Next time you're in Kentucky.
Yep, for sure. Hit us up. Well, thanks everybody for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. We truly appreciate it. And thanks, Will, again for joining us. If you haven't checked out Chicken Cock, make sure you do. They have a really, interesting lineup here, and I would recommend either the 90 proof whiskeys for an entry point to try into the brand before you go drop big money on the limited editions. But we've had a great time tonight talking whiskeys. As always, if you are interested in learning more about Bourbon Lens, go over to Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Bourbon Lens. You can also join our growing Patreon community at patreon.com/Bourbon Lens. We have our tasting club every month, as well as opportunities just to get to know us and hang out with fellow Patreon members. And last but not least, if you could do us a favor, go over to your favorite podcast listening app, hit the subscribe button, and give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate it. And until next time, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.